Good morning, Excellency, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure as well as an honor to share our experience and lesson learned from our project to you all. Actually, my presentation focused on only to the social point of view, even though this session is mainly focused on the economic growth. But what I think that is, whatever interventions are placed, whatever interventions are provided, humans are at the core. Humans are the center of the development. So we should also look at the social point of view. Because there's also we have the outstanding panelists and we will touch upon for the economic point of view. That's why I selected to choose for the social point of view for the sustainable development should be in Myanmar and what are the ministries and the governments are doing. Actually, as all you know, that we are at the crossroads in the midst of the transitions, and we are taking a series of reforms. And the key paradigm of our reform agenda is the top-down to the bottom-up as the people-centered developments. And we focus now on the community empowerment, service delivery to reach at the grassroots level. So, since the inauguration of our government is clearly committed to the poverty reduction and rural development. Government also clearly targeted to reduce the poverty incidence from 32% in 2005 to 60% in 2050. So, as of the commitment to the government and ministry and the forming to the various committees for the rural developments and poverty reductions, and each line ministries are taking for the important initiatives and actions. So, the new initiative that the government has taken is the reconfigurations of the new ministry. That is the Ministry of Livestock, Fisheries and Rural Development, and assign it as the program ministry. And then they also refer to the 8-point action plan for the rural developments and poverty reduction. Since then, our reforming to the new ministries, we have developed the rural development strategy framework, as well as also doing the important initiative for the community driven development program. So, we feel that the sound and fund strategy framework is essential for the achieving our goals of sustainable development. Without framework, without strategy, we found that it might be difficult to reach our goal. That's why we have developed the development strategy framework with the series of consultation with the development partners, NGOs, as well as CSOs and even as the communities. And finally, on the last year, the national workshop for the rural development strategy framework, which was attended by the presidents, as well as also to our TPs and our colleagues from the labs and our presidents, and finally we approved to our strategy framework. So our strategy framework is mainly aimed to enable people and community to manage its own destiny for the combating the poverty. So they will be the manager, not just the participant, not the discussant. So they are playing a key role in our key rural development activities. So to achieve our targets, we have the 5 main strategies. First is about for the targeted strategies. Because in Myanmar, as all you know about there are 64,970 villages. All the government budgets and all our staff capacity can reach our service to all the areas. So in that sense, the targeting is very important. For our targeting strategies is we look at the 5 point of views. The first one is, what is the development need? What will be the beneficiary coverage? What is the social equity? How is the visibility and the replicability? So those are we look at the targeting strategy. And the second strategy is the synergy of the development intervention. As all you know, government are also doing committee to achieve for the socio-economic development of the people, narrow down the urban and rural divide. Meantime, our TPs, our college NGOs are also doing the whole initiative. But all the activities and programs should be synergized. Otherwise, we may not achieve the multiplying impact. That's why our second strategy aims to the synergy of the development interventions. The third one is about sustainable financing. Because in our traditional ways of working, particularly in the government sector, is that we mainly focus on the government budget. But this time is the time for change. So we have developed the sustainable financing strategy. It asks to our DPs, INGOs, and to work together and we mobilize to the funds from the external and internal sources to reach to our sustainable goals. The fourth one is about the effective cooperation strategy. For even in our redevelopment and poverty reduction text, each line ministries are taking for their own initiative. So we need a strong collaboration, strong cooperation in the ministerial level, as well as to the cooperations and collaboration among our deployment workers, service provider, among the DPs, among the INGOs, NGOs, and CSO. That's why we have chosen to the effective cooperation strategies. The first strategy, of course, the government is going ahead to the democratic nation. So we need the good governance practice, accountability, transparency. That is not only to the union level. That is not only to the regional level. That must be started from the village level, village level. So that's why we are doing a lot of initiatives to the good governance process. That can be the foundation for the building the democratic nation. For the effective cooperation is that we form the consortium of development partners. We work together with the DPs. So that consortium of development partner is led by our ministry, as well as to the World Bank, ADB, USAID, DFID, of course, and the Livestock, and we are working together. For the CDBs and each line ministries are also the members of the CDB, representative from the UN agency, representative from the INGOs, NGOs, even are also the joint secretaries, and the members of our consortium. The key objectives of the forming of the consortium is to identify the projects and the relevant programs, to facilitate the coordinations, and to improve our development policies and the procedures. So we are regularly meetings and we are deploying to what should we work together. So in line with our development strategy framework, our ministry is also working a lot of the community-driven development program. So these are the most salient program of the community-driven development funded by the World Bank, ADB, time-based CP companies, even in the government itself. And this year also our government have developed about the Evergreen Village Development Program, and we are doing the 1,450 villages by the government budget. We provide the one village as the $30,000 as the revolving fund. So the community, the village committee have to manage by their own initiative. So these are the dynamic changes that we that government are doing. So we also found that even though we have provided just $30,000 to the one villages, significantly changes in the rural economy as well as the livelihoods and incomes. In the past, Puas are very reluctant to take part in the development process. Even they are afraid to take part in their own development. Now, Puas are getting their capital from that revolving fund, and then they engage to their income generation activities. So what we found that even though that is just for within 1 year, some of the households, they are lifted to the poverty trap. So this is we see that this is the promising trends and the very significance, and we have to scale it up to the next year to the more villages. Yeah, I had to mention about the village internet structures and the organizations. So whenever we can see to the villages, the decision-making process is done by the village headman, the house head, of course the village elder or the village trade development support committee, as well as the religious figures. But we also found that there are a lot of informal, formal and semi-informal organizations are there. For example, the informal organization in the village, there's a religious committee, school committee, health committee, water committees, of the youth groups. In the semi-formal organization, also the firefighting teams, maternity and child welfare. If the projects are going there, there is also the new committees. If the 3 projects are there, there is the 3 project committees. Very, very difficult that I discussed with the villagers and some are, because for example in the Chin State, I found the one villager said only the 20 households, they have the 10 committees. So how we can work? So I asked my colleagues to reconsider for the forming of the new committees or new structure. If it is possible, we wish you to use the existing structure, not to the parallel structures and not to the parallel organizations. Because some areas, there is the conflict between the existing committees and the newly committees. So I asked my colleagues to consider for that point. That was sometimes the really burden to the villagers. Sometimes it's happened to the social divisions. Frankly speaking, next year is the election. If the political instigations are important, using our project as a tool for the political instigation, that might be difficult and that might be danger. That's why my colleagues please consider for the forming of the new organizations or new committee at the village level. And then when we look at to the governments and the communities and the relations, because now we are talking about for the community-driven development. So almost all the activity is based on the community. So we have to consider about the capacity of the community. Frankly speaking, the community members and villagers are able to read and write. That they are not well enough knowledge for our new concept of the community-driven development. They are not quite, sometimes they are aware what they have to do, but they don't know how to do. So we have to teach, we have to train, we have to work together. Just only training is also, I found, not enough. Sometimes training is not like that, left by gone. After finish the training, everything is gone. So we have to work together with the community. So that is a very important one. I know that our college GPs, NGOs and INGOs are working a lot in these areas and a lot of improvement. But for the government side also, we have to work closely with the communities. That can only be the diplomacy. But in some area, of course, we found that just as the project as the pilot, there is no problem. But if we scale up to the nation scale, that's a problem, particularly in the mountainous area, because language is barrier. In the one village, there is so many ethnic groups. Difficult to communicate, difficult to trade. So that's why these are some barriers. And then of course like the infrastructure and adequacy, file limitation, these are also our traditional bottleneck. So when we look at the government side as for the service delivery, frankly speaking, I'm very sorry to say that we are also not quite aware about the new concept. Some people know, but not all. So we have to develop our capacity. What is the policies of the government now? What is the trends and what we are doing? So what should be our knowledge to be equipped? And then what is the service to be delivered to the community? So we also need to develop our capacity. The second one that I inform is our organization and institution and structures and procedures are not suited with our present trends. Because that is also very understandable. Our organizations and institution and structures were developed based on the previous government. This is now the democratic government and we are doing for the people-centered development. So our institutional system and procedures and structures have to be justified again. So based on our past experiences, we found that we are doing a lot of initiatives. We are forming to the committees, but I'm also thinking about for the village leadership. So I put it about the triangle success factor. So community, village leadership, and government, of course, the INGOs and NGOs have to work together in this area. Even though we have developed about for the strategy frameworks and doing a lot of initiatives for the community-driven development, so we still need to improve our project design, need to improve our way of working. For example, the village as the central unit in the development enterprise. So village leader should be the CEO, driver of not the participant. So we have to encourage to the community in terms of the village leadership. And then we may also need to mobilize the resources at the village level, donations or grant or anywhere. And then at the community levels also, they should have the communal reward for the setup materials or non-materials. And then as the information is very important, so they should have the awareness basic education in the village, in the community levels. So I'm proposed to do at the community level. For the government, international organizations and national organizations, we have to synergize in the multiplied impact between the interministerial project as well as project among the NGOs in our government projects. And then we are focusing on the reducing the poverty by 60% by 2050. So the question is, what will be beyond the 2050? So we should also look at the beyond the 2050s, and we should set up the immediate poverty alleviation goals. And then we are also empowering to the village. So we should have the phased approach, not for all. It's impossible to do it, to provide the ground for the all. So we should phased approach like the basis set up in self-reliant village. That can be our thinking of the resilient community. And then we also have rewards to our project villages, because some areas may be failure because of the low interest of the community member, as well as of the lack of the capacities, of the lack of the facilitations of the government. So in that case, we should provide to some motivation to those villages, like the conditional cash transfer program or not. Another one is we have so many pilot projects. I think this is not the time to do for the pilot project. We have done a lot of pilot projects over the past. This time we should have the national model to scale up to the nationwide scale. You can see this everywhere the pilot projects. We cannot do for the own national development. This is not the time for testing. And then for the community leadership, we should train both women and men. In some areas, women are very active in our project sites. Most of the leaders are the women. They are most capable persons. So we should train the leaderships as both women and men. And then for the village leader, they should be the change agent to disseminate the technical innovation, to manage, to plan, and to implement to their own destiny, what they want to do. So they have to plan, they have to design, they have to implement, they have to evaluate. For the government, where we facilitate, provide all the assistance, trying working together with our DPs and ING. So thank you for my discussion.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Along Mingala. It's my real honor to be here today, speaking to this big group of non-migration experts. I come from migration field, and oftentimes I share my migration thoughts to a bunch of migration jerks, always thinking that this migration debate should go out of migration experts. And I really thank Liv, Andrew, the Lift Fund Board, and all the colleagues for giving me this opportunity to be able to share what I think vis-a-vis migration in context of the rural Myanmar with you today. So big thanks. And also my big thanks to Professor Reardon and Dr. Zarni for allowing me to share the session with you too. My pleasure. Okay, so I'll be looking at today things through migration lens. And I don't know to what extent you think of migration in your daily work. I hope my presentation could hook this concept of migration in what you do in your everyday life. Okay, so I will start with this very simple question on what's migration. And please bear with me because I want to have a standardized understanding on what migration is all about. So let me go through this very basic concept again first. So what is migration? To me, migration is this. Migration is this. This buffalo is crossing the river knowing there is a risk. There are crocodiles waiting for them. They still cross the river. This is from Christmas Island, the famous crab migration. Spring rain. And this. So, paleontologists tell us that we all came from this part of Africa 65,000 years ago. I come from Japan, where we often talk about Japanese blood being very specific. When you actually look at this map, we see that this is such a wiki. We all came from somewhere together. We all spread around the world. Migration has been part of our lives, and migration is going to be part of our lives. Migration is so part of our lives. It's an instinct for us, the living things, for better life and survival. If there was no migration, the world would look completely different from the way it looks today. But, so, to me, migration is almost like water. Running water is a natural phenomenon. Water runs from higher place to lower place. Humans move, animals move to where there are better places. However, we are different from water. How are we different from water? We have emotions. We have our feelings. The way we feel about ourselves, the way we feel about the surrounding context, the pressure that we feel, the challenges that we feel are all different. So we are not like water. We just don't move from one direction to the other. Today, I see around this room, I would assume that about 90% of us are migrants. Obviously, non-Myanmar participants, we are definitely international migrants looking for better opportunity in Myanmar. For Myanmar participants, I would assume that many of you have come not from Nepido, from elsewhere, again looking for better opportunities. It's all these feelings that surrounds us that makes us move. And this is what the human life is about, that makes our life so exciting, complex and dynamic. So this is just my introduction on migration before I get into the real hard topic. Okay, so the second question, what makes people move? This is even before getting into the migration question in Myanmar. Okay, so we have like seesaw, as I explained in context of water. The water runs from higher places to lower places. This can be applied to human to many extent. So we have a place of origin and then we have a place of destination. And there are a number of factors that makes us move, and we call it drivers. So what are the drivers? This is actually a non-exhaustive list of drivers. I don't know if the color is clear enough, unfortunately, but we have drivers such as employment opportunities, education opportunities, better income, better life, better safety, better security. All these things are the factors that drive us to move from one place to the other. The important thing about these drivers is that they are never definitive, but they are relative. I give you one example. You know Thailand is right now a net migrant receiving country. They have about 3 to 4 million migrants living in Thailand. Did you know that 30 years ago, Thailand was a net migrant sending country? They are behind the construction of high-rise buildings in Singapore. The Thai was so proud that they built those high-rise buildings in Singapore. From net migrant sending country, 30 years later they have become net migrant receiving country. So the seesaw tilted from what was sending to what is now receiving. At the same time, a lot of Thais still migrate abroad. They have about 150,000 Thais living abroad, working like how the Myanmar migrant workers are working in Thailand. They go to Taiwan, they go to Korea, Japan, Israel, and we may wonder why. Because in Thailand, the unemployment rate is something like 1%. So there are jobs for the Thais. But the problem is Thais are not interested in those jobs because there are better opportunities elsewhere. So this is all about seesaw. So Thai workers go elsewhere to gain better employment, but then they are creating labor shortages. As a result, people from neighboring countries are going to Thailand to work. So it's all about this seesaw. And then also, another thing is that what constitutes better life? What constitutes better employment is also very subjective. It's not about objective. That's why people go to all sorts of different directions for all sorts of different reasons. And then we have what this thing called enablers. So this is like a pivot of a seesaw. When the pivot is not very pointy, things may be different on the place of origin or place of destination, but the seesaw doesn't tilt easily. But then once the pivot gets pointy, it allows the seesaw to tilt easily. And these are the things such as networks, information, communication, transportation, systems, perception, also education. I've been visiting this village on the other side of Twante in Irrawaddy region for personal reasons. And this is a village where the villagers are very keen on education. So they worked a lot with the education department to actually build high school in the village. And having a high school in the village is quite significant in Myanmar context. They say that the more people get educated, the more they deserve better livelihood. So the smart people will move out of the village. So education actually drives, education enables people to move out of the village to gain better employment in Yangon, and as a result, it sort of facilitates migration. Perception. I went to Kayin State the other day in a place called Langwe Township. I met with this girl, 20 years old, 2 grade graduate. So she hardly spoke Burmese. We had to communicate in Thai. She had been living in Thailand for the past 7 years, working as a housemaid in Thailand, and she earns $250 a month. I asked her whether she has any intention of coming back to Myanmar. She said, oh, it's too hot, no aircon in the village. On the same day, I went back to Pa'an, and I went to this Myanmar restaurant where I met a girl of a similar age. She was from Pateng. She was an 8 standard graduate, earning $40 a month. So I asked her, you know the local people from Pa'an, they go to migrate to Thailand, why don't you go? She said, well, I don't know anybody working in Thailand. I know the pays are higher there, I'm scared, and my father doesn't allow me. It's about perception. It's about network. It's about communication, information. Certain people have better access to those things that enables them to move. Certain people don't have access to those enablers, and then they decide to stop at certain places. Okay, now I will move into the main points of my presentation today. So what is going to happen? From migration perspective, what's going to happen to the rural society of Myanmar through migration lens? The previous presenters, the professor and doctor, have talked about triangles, and interestingly, I also came up with 3 that kind of represents triangle. So what's going to happen to Myanmar? or what is happening in Myanmar. Right now, the enablers of migration is improving. The road, the infrastructures, the mobile phones, the network of people, internet, all these things are not happening in the cities, but also going into the rural areas, which enables people to move. We have industrialization. We've been talking about it. Maybe we haven't felt it in real terms, but I'm sure it will come sooner or later, which will create the way society will be structured. Opportunity gaps. This is about the gaps in income between the cities and the rural area, which is about education, which is about entertainment, excitement. There will be greater gaps between the cities and the rural areas. So with these three changes, what's going to happen to the rural area from migration perspective? First, there will be increase in mobility. I guess there's no doubt about it. Oops. The second point is a migration to further distances. My first encounter with Myanmar started in 1999. I lived in Shan State. I worked as a community development worker. I worked in many different villages, Wa village, Shan village, Aka, Lafu, Po'o, Taunya, Inta, name it. Every single community I went, I witnessed migration. And this is what got me interested in migration. Now I go back to the same community and I hear the people traveling to distances that I hadn't seen before. They are going to China, they are going to Thailand, they are going to Malaysia, Singapore, the Gulf countries. In the past, it was very difficult for Myanmar people to get passports. Now it's very easy to get passports. It's very easy to get job opportunities on the internet. These things really drives people to further distances where there are better opportunities. Low cost airlines, another thing. Okay, changes in the direction of flows. I talked about industrialization. Where does the industrialization occur? The factories will be built in where there's good infrastructure, good electricity. Of course, they will be concentrated in some places. In the past, the migration within and beyond Myanmar was either from the border area, predominantly from the border areas to the neighboring countries. So in case of Southeast, we were talking about Mon State, Kayin State, Tanintali, Shan people going to Thailand for employment, Shan people going to China, and the people from Irrawaddy, people from Dry Zone and Bago, they moved to those border area of Myanmar for better income. So it was a mixture of international migration and internal migration. In context of lift area, I guess it's majority internal migration from rural to rural. And because they were engaging in agricultural sector, the labor demand was very seasonal, so people moved seasonally. Now, changing the direction of flows because of industrialization, people will be heading to the cities and nearby cities. ADB has predicted that there will be about 10 million non-new agricultural jobs by 2030. 10 million people have to be employed. Some of them may come from the cities, but I would assume that a lot of them come from the rural areas. And it's not only the migrant workers who move, they may move with the families. So when you think of 10 million people moving, you feel the extent of the dynamism. I mentioned about the seasonal pattern. From seasonal to all year and semi-permanent migration will start to take place. Usually the seasonality of migration is dictated by the employment opportunities. So people don't move to farms and then they just don't sit there doing nothing during the agricultural downtime. But once people start to work in non-farm employment, the work is there throughout the year. That's the migration pattern of people from border area of Myanmar to Thailand. Because in Thailand, people work in construction, fisheries, fishery processing, domestic work, factories, where the work is there all year round. Right now, majority of people from the lift area move seasonally because they engage in agricultural farm employment. Once they start to move to the factories, once they start moving to non-farm employment, then they will be away from the villages for a long time. Urbanization and depopulation. I talked a bit about urbanization, but then the other side of the coin of urbanization is depopulation. And we've seen this in many parts of the world. Another notable thing is with the depopulation, it's not the depopulation of all segments of the society equally. As I heard repeatedly from different villages, it's usually the depopulation of smart ones who migrate because they can earn more money and they can come back with better income, or depopulation of certain age groups because 80 years old grandfather doesn't migrate for employment. It's usually the working level population who migrate away. When you go to the southeast, you often find villages full of grandfathers, and children, but then the mothers and fathers and young people are away working elsewhere. From individual to family migration. In the past, when people were moving only for short term, bringing the entire family may not be viable. If they live in the farms, there's no schools, there's no proper housing, so the people who work moved. Also, similar situation in Thailand, where right now the Thai labor migration system does not really allow migration of families. So many families decide to leave their kids behind in Myanmar while they are in Thailand. With industrialization, things will change. Because the migration will be much more sort of longer term, so the families start to think, is it nice for the family to be separated? Also, there are better opportunities in the urban areas. Better schools, easier access, so they may bring the family. That means it's not only the movement of the people who are working, but there will also be a movement of people who are not working but accompanying the family. And then changes in the livelihood options. Professor talked about the remittances becoming an incentive to create non-traditional form of employment. Sorry. I saw one example in Minn State where people say that remittances coming back from Thailand actually facilitated to turn their livelihood options from corn to rubber. Because the rubber takes 7 years for the tree to start producing the rubber juice. And if you are living off every year from the crop produced by that land, then people cannot just sit and wait for 7 years until the rubber starts to produce the juice. But then with the remittances, with the regular remittances coming back from Thailand, now they have an opportunity to sit and wait for 7 years until the rubber plantation becomes mature. So that's one way of how the remittances is changing the livelihood options. Another example that I heard from Kayin State is that some local villagers don't trust the migrants. They think that they're troublemakers, they steal things, it distracts the community cohesion, so they're like, no migrants into our community. But at the same time, people are migrating out. So what happens is that there's labor shortage. And because of the labor shortage, people gave up on cultivating the farms, because it's much easier to wait for the income coming back from Thailand than grow rice by themselves. So there's a change in livelihood options in the village level. Changes in what determines the riches and poor. And one interesting story that I heard from villagers, again in Southeast. So this guy said, in the past, what constitutes the riches and what constitutes the poor were determined by the size of the land that they had for agriculture. So if you have 50 acres, you're richer than if you have no agricultural land. Right now, what constitutes the riches is determined by the number of children working in Thailand. It's much more productive to have many children, so they all go to Thailand and send the average of $1,000 per year back to their home. They don't have to have a land, they're rich. So when you go to the villages and when you do a kind of conventional village development activities, this migration is actually getting your way in determining your target group. And then lastly, larger income gaps between remittances receiving households or communities and the others. According to the census, the population of people from Shan State, Mon, Kayin, and Tanintali constitute about 20% of the entire population of Myanmar. According to the study that we did in Thailand, they constitute about 74% of the entire migrant population from Myanmar. In terms of the remittances, 82% of the remittances sent back from Thailand to Myanmar goes to one of those states. And the estimation of the remittances from Thailand to Myanmar is now about $3 billion per year. So if you think of 82% of the $3 billion from Thailand to Myanmar only going to very specific part of Thailand, specific part of Myanmar, not to the rest of the country, you start to think, okay, what does this mean in terms of the ability of the local people to invest in future investments to meet their daily necessities. Also within the communities, people start sending, the household would have migrants and the household does not have migrant. And in this household who have one migrant in Thailand start to get $1,000 a year. And the household who don't have migrants don't get this remittance. So it starts to create this sort of income differences between the communities and within the communities as well. So these are the things that I personally foresee will be happening in Myanmar. What does this mean to us, the policymakers, the practitioners? I would be very interested and committed in engaging more with you on discussions. So just to wrap up my presentation, what is this migration business all about? To me, migration is what it is. We have to live with it. It's like a rain. When it rains, and it rains for a reason. Rain can be both good or bad. The way we perceive rain is really depending on how we understand it, how we prepare for it, and how we manage it. If the migration is going to happen, we may as well manage the migration to our benefit. Thank you so much.